So, the greatest rivalry in all of college sports, UGA versus fast cars.
It's ridiculous.
Another one. Nitro Tuggle.
Our boy Nitro Tuggle was going 107 miles an hour on the loop around Athens. And for any of us who lived there for a short period of time, we definitely saw people going that fast, but my God,
a long
son.
period of time.
Yes. For those of us locals. But 107 miles
locals
an hour,
in fifth years, right?
Yeah. 107 miles an hour is very fast, and Nitro got busted, man.
Yeah. How does this keep happening? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, we know that they're doing all this education, they're putting people through classes, they're having guest speakers come in. Like, they've made it a point of emphasis, but yet these kids just keep screwing up.
Yeah, Kirby talked about it in his last press conference. He said, that all the things that we've done, we're not going to stop doing. He said that they've done, defensive driving programs with the kids. They've done ride-along driving with the kids to teach them to drive. He joked that it was the same stuff he did with his kids. He said that they've had people come in and speak. And at this point, with Nitro Tuggle and with Damian Easley, now they are suspending players when they get driving-related charges. I don't know about you, but you don't really hear about college players getting suspended for speeding.
I know. It's wild. Used to, you'd always hear about, players getting suspended at Georgia for, underage drinking, getting caught out the bars or something like that. I mean, Steve Spurrier even had that quote saying he loved playing Georgia at the beginning of the season because they probably had a few of their best players suspended, so you had a good chance at them. He wasn't wrong. But now it's crazy that kids are, I mean, I think it kind of has to do with the NIL stuff, to be honest. These kids are getting lots of money, and good for them. But when you're that age and you have no idea how to manage money, what's the first thing that you think about it when you were in high school? If you had money, like, what would you do? You'd buy
You get a car,
hot rod, right?
Yep.
Like, that was all you cared about. So that's all they care about, is getting that ride, and they're usually really fast because that's what you do. And
right.
They're the kid brain. Like, people forget that these are still kids. If they're 18, 19, I mean, yeah, they're built like brick shit houses and can, do amazing things, but they still don't have the life experience, or in some cases, the common sense to stay off the road, follow traffic laws. And
yeah,
it's worse now because of social media. It's so much easier to capture this stuff.
Well, as I say, I think it's also worse, particularly in Georgia's case, because now every single time a kid gets a speeding ticket, it's front page news, right? The Nitro Tuggle story, which started out as, more driving difficulties for Georgia. If you go to ESPN right now, the front page is Nitro Tuggle was going 107 miles an hour. A kid's speeding ticket is the front page of ESPN.com right now.
Yeah, like, it's annoying because now on Twitter, I mean, it's just going to continue to snowball. Oh, this is an epidemic, and Georgia has some kind of systemic issue in the program, and at this point, like, it's kind of getting hard to even defend it. But when you know that they're doing everything they can to educate these fools and they're still messing up, I mean, at what point do you just say, yeah, it's on this kid?
Yeah, I mean, they specifically asked Kirby today. They said, "Coach, is there a point where you're just going to start kicking people off?" And Kirby flat out said, "No, I'm not prepared to do that, because the second that Georgia becomes the program where if you get a speeding ticket, you're kicked off the team, is the second that guys are going to start transferring or looking other places. Guys make mistakes all the time. No matter how much you educate people, kids in particular, they're going to do stupid things because that's what young people do. Is it okay that this keeps
lots
happening?
of stupid things back in the day.
Right. Is it okay that this stuff is happening? Absolutely not. But to treat kids making mistakes like this as horrible human beings is also a mistake because it's sending the wrong message. That's just sending a message that you're a horrible person as opposed to trying to teach the kid a lesson.
Nick Saban had a great point on that years ago. He was asked a similar question. Are you going to kick this player off your team because this happened to him? And he said, no. Why would I kick someone off the team for making one mistake, a moment in their life when they have a whole track record of being a great kid and doing all the right things, but they make one bad decision and now they're in the doghouse, potentially kicked off the team. He said he's not going to do that. Just like what you were saying with Kirby, we're going to teach them, make them grow them into functional adults.
Yeah. Another thing that Kirby mentioned today when he was talking about this is he said that he's seeing a lot of kids that are coming to college now at 18, 19 years old. And when they're getting to Athens, they're getting their driver's licenses for the first time.
That's wild.
He said he's seeing that a lot. And he said in particular, I don't know which one of the two cases we have here, but one of them was one of those cases. It's a kid who got his driver's license after he came to college. So instead of being an 18, 19-year-old kid who's been driving for 2 years, these are 18, 19-year-old kids who are just getting their driver's license, and their first car is something that's being bought with NIL money that goes faster. They're not driving a 1998 Ford Taurus. They're driving a 2024, a 2024 Charger or, something else that goes really fast. So these players are in fast cars and they don't have the experience driving. And as much as you can tell them, don't speed, it's just not realistic. So the situation is bad. I don't know if there's a right answer. Everybody's like, oh, Georgia should have a permanent NIL deal with Uber, or you got to take their keys. I'm telling you, you do things like that, you treat kids like that, who all of a sudden the power is all in their hands because they can transfer whenever they want and they can get NIL. Kids are going to leave. You can't do that. And the second these people that are all up in arms about it, second Georgia starts losing players and they start losing games, their tune is going to change real fast.
Oh yeah. And a lot of these schools that are, harping on this stuff, like fans of those schools, the same thing is happening in their cities. It's just not getting press.
They just haven't had an incident where unfortunately someone got killed.
Yeah.
And
absolutely right.
That's harsh to say, but the reality is Georgia's under this scrutiny because of what happened. So
yep. And it's warranted.
They've got to continue to get out ahead of it. They've got to continue to address it. But to think that they're going to kick kids off the team because they get a speeding ticket, that's not going to work. So Nitro Tuggle, he's suspended right now. So that's costing him reps. He was going to be a sophomore this year, expected to compete for time with some transfers and some returners in the wide receiver room. This is hurting him.
Yeah. He transfers after spring because of this?
He almost transferred after the fall anyway, right? It would not surprise me if he transfers at this point because it might be a situation. Some people are like, oh, we're just going to kick him out the door, encourage him to go in the portal after all this. I don't think that's the case, but I think he might see the writing on the wall.
No.
He's suspended right now, so he's not practicing in spring practice when he needed depth, to move up the depth chart, and he's not getting that chance. So he's going to be knocked back. He's going to be back there with two uber talented freshmen. This just might have been his shot that he's, it cost him, and it wouldn't surprise me if he transfers. Now, Damian Easley, on the other hand, is a backup offensive lineman. For him, I haven't heard anything about him wanting to transfer in the past. I would say he's a guy that was going to be a backup this year, probably anyway. So I wouldn't suspect that he would be the same case. But as out of receiver, that's a different story.
Oh yeah, we all know receivers are the divas of the team anyway.
Yep, them in corners.
Yeah. All right. Hey, folks, if you haven't already, please take a minute to subscribe to the channel. Give us a like on this video. It really helps us, and we really appreciate it.
So, speaking of a little bit brighter news, earlier in the day before all this news came out about driving issues in Athens, Josh Pate did an interview with Kirby. It was about 45 minutes long, and it was really, really good. If you are a fan of college football, I totally recommend that you go out and find this interview because Kirby really addressed a lot more of the state of college football, not so much about Georgia in particular. That, you know, they touched on a few things, Georgia, obviously, the SEC championship, coaching, but this was really just an overall state of college football type interview. Kirby talked a lot about how things have changed, you know, in his years of coaching. Burl, you had a chance to listen to it. What were some things that stood out to you?
I loved when he was breaking down how he had to learn to watch film. And he was going on about we had to actually hand draw the plays watching each film that we got. But nowadays it's out there. You just buy it and it's there. I thought that was a really good story, and I, I think it just shows like how deep, the depth of knowledge that these college coaches actually have when it comes to the X's and O's of everything. That I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, he said that was right after he got hired by Jim Donnan, and his first job was breaking down all of Purdue's film from the entire year because they were getting ready to play Purdue in the bowl game. So he had to watch film of their entire season and write down every single play, which hash it was on, where the ball went, who blocked who. And for a young coach, I mean, my God, that's a wealth of experience just having to go to that detail and learn that. And I think that's something that coaches nowadays miss because, like he said, they don't even do that information within their own program now. They pay somebody to do that, to have all that information charted and everything. So that's definitely a change. And it's interesting because Kirby's staff, which that was another topic that he covered on, was that he didn't have any staff changes this year. Um, he said that he would much rather have continuity. If you have a chance to keep a coach from year to year, he would always take that opportunity first. And Kirby's staff is kind of filled with a couple of old school guys, you know, a couple of guys who have been around for a while, Bobo, Stacey Searles, but he's got some new guys in there too. So different minds, obviously. He's brought new guys in throughout the years. You know, Lanning came in for a while, Fran Brown, you know, and obviously Glenn Schumann is one of those guys. So it's a good blend, and stability is very important. And I think it is because this day and age, you're building relationships with recruits and things like that. It's not necessarily always who's the hot coach. And I know lots of people wanted Georgia to change coaches this offseason, but was keeping the coach intact, was keeping that staff intact a good thing? I think it was.
I do too. I do too. Think about it. In the past, one of the biggest negative recruiting things that people do is say, "Oh, is your coach going to be there after next year?" You know, that was always a thing. But now, at least at Georgia, we've been fortunate that they've been able to have that stability, and that helps with recruiting because these guys are building relationships with these players at an early age. Some even when they're in middle school, which is wild.
I think that the change is that now, where it used to be, is your coach going to be here next year? Now the question is more, is your teammates going to be here next year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that was something else that Kirby talked about. He talked about the changing in the roster. He said that as a head coach, before you used to bring in a signing class, you know, 25 players maximum, maybe one or two transfers that are sitting out for a year. Now he said he will expect to have 35 to 40 new players in the organization every year. And the biggest impact there is it's just not as much depth. There's not as much depth, and you're going to have more younger players on your roster.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the glaring difference, one more thing. So the glaring difference he said was looking at his roster going into the 2021 season that ended up winning the national championship first now. He said even back then, 2021, he said it was mostly upperclassmen, seniors. There was lots of that. It's so different now, just in a couple of years.
Yeah, he was saying that it basically takes 2 years to really get a player up to speed well enough to play full time. So I kind of equate this to a real world situation that we deal with in life. You have staff turnover, and then you have to hire somebody. So, someone leaves for a better opportunity. You got to hire. It takes forever to get them onboarded and up to speed before you see any positive returns. So imagine doing that with 30 to 40 people every year. That's tough.
Yeah. And the other piece of that Kirby talked about with these new players and how these players are coming in, they're very focused on NIL and all that jazz is the entitlement. The idea that players come in and they expect, hey, I've already earned money. I'm ready to go. I'm coming in, I'm expecting to start, I'm getting playing time, and they don't handle criticism well. And he said, as the media has increased its intention around recruiting and prop these kids up more, and then they're getting money on top of it, it's really boosted that sense of entitlement. It used to not be that way. They used to come in and kids were humble. Now they come in and they're criticized or they're not starting immediately and they want to quit. They want to give up. And that's
Yeah.
just a major change.
Yeah, that's a kind of a sad state of affairs for our society if you really think about it. The thing that I appreciated about what Kirby was saying, he's really big about, and Nick Saban too, that the standard is the standard. We're not going to lower our standards just to accommodate a player because they have talent. That's how you build a program like Georgia has built.
Right. Kirby said that. He said that their attention now is on retaining players, whereas before their attention used to be on gaining players. That's the difference. And in season, the coaches have to spend their time as opposed to being focused on recruiting. They are spending more time recruiting their own team than they are recruiting new players every year, and that's a big change from what they were used to.
It's almost like running a tech company, trying to hold on to your devs.
Absolutely. One of the last things Kirby talked about was the biggest unknown about all of this landscape of NIL and everything has to do with this upcoming revenue sharing deal where, they're going to have a pool of money to pay players. You'll be able to divide that up. Everybody will have that same cap. Whatever it is, $20 to $25 million is what it looks like it's going to be. Outside of that, the big schools and stuff will still be able to get more talent because you'll be able to use NIL in the sense that it was supposed to be, name, image, and likeness as opposed to direct payments. But there will now be this NCAA clearinghouse, and how that ultimately shakes out is what Kirby's talking about is unknown. The clearinghouse will look at every NIL deal and determine if it's fair market value or not. So somebody could have gotten an NIL deal for a little car lot, but this car lot's secretly funded by like 7 other people and they throw a ton of money. Well, if the NCAA clearinghouse or whatever this group is says, no, that doesn't match, what service the player is providing, then they won't approve it. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I just don't know how that could actually be enforced.
Yeah.
Because that's NIL is technically outside of the realm of college football, the way it's supposed to be, technically, right. Like how it's supposed to be. So if they're going to say they're going to have a clearinghouse, you are literally giving away potential earnings to this clearinghouse who is going to have somebody maybe right out of college going to they work for Accenture. Is that who it was?
That's who I worked for.
Yeah, exactly. So think about it. Like, you would have had your finger on the button to approve or reject someone's offer of an NIL. And it doesn't make sense to me, because if I own a business and I want local college player to do some commercials for me, like, that's a contract between me and that player. Like,
Right.
who cares what the NCAA or whoever's gonna run it is
Right.
gonna say? I think that one's gonna get challenged probably the most in court. And I think the only way that really becomes a thing is if there does become some kind of players union and there's collective bargaining and all that jazz.
Yeah, I think the other thing that Kirby talked about that's changing with that is that the roster size rule is coming in as well. So they're going to be doing away with walk-ons. Essentially won't be a thing anymore. Every team will have a set size roster. Right now they're talking about 105. So before it used to be 85, but you could carry, walk-ons and things like that. Well, with revenue sharing, everybody's going to be getting paid. So every player that's on the football team, whether they're on scholarship or not, is going to be considered just a player on the team. So you're going to have to allocate money for that. Every team's going to have money allocated to try to retain their talent, but that's not going to stop other teams from overspending and tampering.
Yeah. Even Kirby said the tampering's never going away.
Yeah.
With that in mind, it makes sense why teams are starting to hire GMs to manage that type of, or that part of the business, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's an interesting topic, because the newest college GM is Andrew Luck at Stanford, right? Andrew Luck kind of disappeared from football for a few years after he retired. Of course, his dad was an executive and helped with the XFL and a number of other things. But Andrew Luck has come in as the GM of Stanford football, and in just a few days has totally flipped that program on its ears with the announcement that they were firing their coach, who the previous regime was keeping. They came and said that there was some accusations of abusive behavior and maybe some mistreatment of office staff. But to me, it really sounds like Andrew Luck looked at the state of Stanford, where they've had won 2 or 3 games the last couple of years, remembered how it was when he was there, and said, nah, we're starting over.
Yeah, he's got to find his Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah. And it's very interesting, because I was looking this up today, like who are they going to hire? And one of the candidates that was kind of floated out there on the internet was Chuck Pagano, who's Andrew Luck's head coach in the NFL. He's working for the Ravens right now, but
that'd be awesome.
He's an older guy, but he would come in, potentially as kind of a stopgap. That he's an older guy, so it wouldn't be a long-term solution, but maybe just to stabilize the program and help kind of mold it in his image,
Yeah, that would be interesting. I like Chuck Pagano. He's hilarious on Pat McAfee.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. The GM, the first real GM making GM actions.
Yeah.
Pretty neat.
I know that some other teams have hired GMs as well. It kind of seems like that's a new thing. And I guess in this day where they're going to be paying players and they've got all this NIL money and all these deals and all that, maybe that's something you need. I don't see some of the old school coaches, Kirby in particular, ever giving up that control. If you are a control freak coach, you are not going to give up control of your team to somebody else. And I even read earlier this winter, there was an article about the Georgia staff preparing for this new revenue sharing deal and how they were hiring up new positions. But it was very clearly stated that Georgia was not hiring a person to run personnel, and that job would remain under Kirby Smart. So,
yeah. So I think the real question is, so right now, coaches are hiring these GMs. At what point does the GM start hiring the coaches?
I mean, clearly here in this case, Andrew Luck made the call to fire the coach. So at Stanford, that was set up that way. And yes, you're right, because historically in a college program,
Mm-hmm.
the head coach reports to the head coach reports to two people. That's the athletic director and the president of the university. Everyone else answers to him.
And they're the highest paid state employee.
Right. If you have GMs, it's gonna, it'll be interesting. Like I said, some of these guys that are the control freak guys will maintain that control, but how will that turn out when you have a GM of a program and a head coach who's very well paid? And how does that power dynamic shake out? I don't know.
And this would be interesting. So, as these coaches start to get a little older, what if they just move into a GM role and hire coaches themselves? Like they still control everything, but now they don't have to do the day-to-day coaching responsibilities. They can.
I mean, kind of what Georgia did with Vince Dooley, kind of, pushed him into the AD role, and he, of course, hired Ray Goff, who was like his protege. And we know that didn't work out great, but it could be one of those situations where, like you said, you hire a coach like a Chuck Pagano to come in and be the coach for a few years with a plan that he's going to move into another role. I think it's just it's an increase in the size of the college football bureaucracy, right? College football was traditionally ruled by kings who set everything, controlled their programs, were gods in their towns. And as this college football world becomes more and more like professional sports and more business like, it looks like we might be moving away from that as well.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it yet. The, the thing that will be interesting, though, is the emphasis on recruiting because it's not the NFL. There is no draft. There's no fairness or equity in college football. It's market driven, right? So these players have all the power in the world to go from one school to the next, and the schools don't really have a lot of, or they don't have any control over it now, but maybe they will once they institute some of these things. But it would be interesting to see a guy like Chuck Pagano come into Stanford, and can he recruit at the college level? He might be. I mean, he's a decent enough coach, but recruiting, being built for recruiting, is a whole different ball game,
right?
And that's what has really set Kirby and Saban apart from the rest.
Well, let's look at what's happening at North Carolina, right? I mean, you have an example of that, a veteran NFL coach coming in to recruit for the first time in his life, right? If the Belichick experience turns out successful and he comes in there and finds success, because I think he was given the GM and coaching title at North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. So he's kind of controlling everything, but it may work out great in this mold of having somebody, especially in these early days of this pay for play, truly where they're paying players, and it's not through an NIL collective anymore. It's through the university they're representing. It might be interesting to see if more head coaches initially come from the NFL grounds where they've had this experience with paying players and dealing with salary and demands and retention and all that. It's going to be an interesting next few years. Part of this pay for play whole situation, revenue sharing, is that they are retroactively doing this. So NCAA players from 2016 on will be eligible for back pay. So this first year or two, it's going to be real interesting to see if some of these schools can keep up. I don't know if this is going to drive teams away from being FBS level programs, but if you're required to back pay this, I don't know how that works out. But they said that the decision on this, the final decision, is coming. I think Kirby said he thinks it's going to happen in April. So in April, by May, we should probably know exactly what's in this and where it's going to go. But right now, it's a lot of unknowns. It's just a lot of speculation.
Get your popcorn ready.
Yep. It'll be interesting.
Ah, okay. Let's talk about DJ Lagway.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about on the field stuff as opposed to all the money and everything outside of the field. So DJ Lagway, Florida sophomore quarterback, obviously had a great freshman year last year, and is expected to be one of the rising stars in all of college football. I wouldn't put him as my first team All SEC quarterback because I think Lenora Sellers is DJ Lagway, but already developed. But that's beside the point. DJ Lagway is seen as the hope for Florida. Florida played well down the stretch. They won 8 games against the toughest schedule in the country. And so he's really being looked at as kind of like the person to return Florida to this greatness that they used to have. Only problem is the guy can't stay healthy.
Yeah, that's a problem. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you can't stay on the field, you're not a good player.
Right. And, he got hurt last year. Last year, he got hurt running. He got hurt in the Georgia game. He ended up, coming back from that. But this spring, it's his shoulder. He's got a shoulder injury. And right now, he's not throwing at Florida spring practice. And for as many highlights as he had, downfield bombs to open receivers, and everybody's gushing over his arm strength and all that, he only completed 59% of his passes. And he had 12 touchdowns, but he had 9 interceptions. And yes, he threw for 10 yards a pass, but that was because he relied heavily on those downfield bombs. The intermediate and short passes is where he struggled. And those are the things that he probably really could have worked on in spring practice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's gonna be tough for Florida next year. Breaks my heart.
I mean, if he's not healthy, that could be very, very tough for Florida, because I think they're relying on him to kind of lead this program back. And that's what you need. I mean, if you're a solid historical program, but you've had a rough couple of years, you need somebody to get your program excited, right? Yeah. You need something for the country to get behind, to remind those, fringe fans that may have jumped on somebody else's bandwagon to come back on. And I think he could be. They haven't had they had Kyle Trask, but Kyle Trask was kind of a 1-year wonder. They haven't had somebody down there at Florida since Tebow that really energized them at quarterback. So
he's got the chance to do that, and I hate to see any player be hurt. I mean, that's
right.
You don't wish that upon anybody. So I hope he does get better. I don't want to see people, be successful, just not against Georgia.
Injury concerns are a part of it, but I think him being injured right now and missing out on this development time that he needed really should be a red flag for Florida right now, because if he didn't develop from last year, if he was still going off his raw abilities, which are great, he's going to need in season to develop that stuff. So, and they have another tough schedule again. It's not like it gets that much easier for them. So, because, the SEC schedule just flipped. I think they still play in Miami this year. Florida State's not going to be a total dumpster fire, I don't think, this year. I mean, could be, but nothing's as bad as last year. So,
it'll be interesting. Do you see any of the Gunnar Stockton press conferences?
Hey, Gunnar Stockton and Brock Bowers, I mean, good God, what are they, 45-year-old men playing college football with their hairlines?
Male pattern baldness is a sign of super high testosterone.
Let's just say that if you were expecting Gunnar Stockton to come in there and, wow the crowd with his loquaciousness, I think we quickly learned that's not the man for that.
No, it totally reminded me of the halftime interview in Varsity Blues with Jonathan Moxon. Heck, geez. I want to thank God.
Yeah. The other funny part of the interview was they were like, "Hey Gunner, did Carson Beck let you know that he was going to transfer?" His response was, "No, he didn't tell me. He was too busy."
Yeah. Rowdy and Volsky, he posted the full clip, so he wasn't taking a dig at Carson at
Oh
all.
no,
He,
no.
he, he just said, I hope he does good. He was busy. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm excited for Gunner. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens at G Day. We're going,
Yeah.
right?
So, that's the plan. Since it's not on TV, we figure we got to be there in person to, or else heck are we going to talk about it credibly without people saying we don't know ball?
Well, we heard something.
Yeah. We looked at some stats, Um, yeah, I'm going to try to get up there. It's not on TV, and we've talked ad nauseum about the spring game thing. It seems like the reality of potentially having real games in spring is a thing. So that would be awesome. The news came out today that Oklahoma and Oklahoma State would like to reignite Bedlam because
That'd
they're
be
not in the
awesome.
same conference anymore. But to be able to play that game again, that'd be cool. I said, well, heck, let's fire it up. Let's play Georgia Southern because we know that we're not going to play them in a game that means anything ever again after they almost beat us in 2015. But I'd be all for playing a little Georgia State, Georgia Southern first spring game.
Kennesaw State.
Yeah.
Georgia military.
Hey, Georgia military back in the day was stacked with future NFL prospects. The guys that couldn't make the grades to get into college were at Georgia military and Hargrave. But yeah, I mean, news out of camp. This is Gunner's job to lose. They said Puglisi does things that the arm talent is obviously there, but his knowledge and experience of the offense is not at the level ready for. Now there's a long time to the season, and if something changes between then and Puglisi ends up starting, he certainly could be a great player. But one of the things Kirby talked about is that with this lack of experience that he has on his team, he said, if I had a whole team of guys with experience like Gunner, we would be in a much better spot. So that tells you all you need to know is that Kirby respects Gunner for his knowledge of the team. That was another thing that Pate addressed with Kirby when they were talking, because there were some comments on Pate's website that, old Kirby, he's just going to go with seniority and loyalty when he makes a selection. And Josh Pate was like, that's dumb. Kirby Smart is the top of the coaching profession. He's going to go with the guy who gives him the best chance to win.
Yeah.
And Kirby said, Kirby's direct quote when Pate asked him, he said, you have to take the guy that will make the best decisions to try to win the game.
Yeah.
You have to get the right players around that quarterback to make a team. It's not about seniority. It's about decision making, and it's about team.
And it's so frustrating that people still question how Kirby operates in that area, because that's always been the gripe. Oh, he's too loyal. He's too loyal. That's not the case. He sees these players every day at practice. So if you're watching right now and you're one of those fans that's like, oh, Kirby doesn't know what he's doing. He does. He knows exactly what he's doing. He has won 2 national titles, a few SEC championships. We're in the golden era of Georgia football. We've never experienced anything like this as a program. And you just think back to the whole Stetson Bennett situation. Everybody wanted someone else. It's always someone else. And he was the best player.
Somebody even pointed out online today, they said that for any of the people who want to say that, oh, look, Georgia Why would any 5-star quarterback want to go to Georgia? Look at what Georgia's done when they've had 5-star quarterbacks. Well, look at the 5-star quarterbacks that have been in Athens. Jacob Eason, okay, he transferred from Georgia, never started a game in the NFL, was a journeyman. So was his 5-star talent developed when he left Georgia and went to Washington? No. Justin Fields left Georgia, yes, went to Ohio State and was successful, was drafted in the NFL, but has not been a successful NFL quarterback, has been benched multiple times and been a backup. So was he developed beyond what he was when he was at Georgia? No. Right? JT Daniels, when he was at Georgia, he was a successful winning quarterback. He transferred. What happened? He got beat around and ended up having to retire from football. Did he develop when he left Georgia? No.
Negative.
So anybody who says that Georgia doesn't do a good job with these 5-star quarterbacks and they transferred, and why didn't Georgia develop them better? Maybe Georgia was developing them better. Maybe Georgia wasn't the problem. Maybe those guys were the problem. So maybe it's time to stop harping on Georgia's treatment of 5-star players and take a little bit better look at how guys are rated 5-star players. And maybe pay attention a little better to the coaching staff that took Jake Fromm to a national championship as a true freshman when he wasn't supposed to be the starter, or took Stetson Bennett to 2 national titles, or took Carson Beck, who was a 3-year backup, to a 13-1 season and then another SEC championship. Maybe pay attention to that and a little bit less about those guys who left, went somewhere else and didn't get developed.
Yeah. I think Kirby's record speaks for itself. He's always going to put the best player in that's going to give him the best chance to win. And that's the way it should be.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's quick, easy today. Good conversation. Loved it. That's going to do it for us today. We really appreciate you joining in, tuning in with us. We hope you enjoyed it. Give us a like, subscribe. It takes 2 seconds, helps us out, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah. Until next time, I'm Street.
And I am Burl.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.